what am I going to talk about? I'm going to talk really about the future. I don't come from the mining space, I come from the technology area. And I'm very clear that we're going through a revolution in the energy and the mobility space. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that and then what it means for the mining industry. Because I've heard a lot here and everyone talks about demand for copper going up, demand for lithium, but you have to understand that there's also going to be demand for other commodities that goes down. So I'm going to talk about that. But before I do that, let me just talk a little bit what's going on in the automobile industry itself. I'll explain why it's going through a revolution. There's 4 reasons. One is materials, electricity, digitalization, and service. I'll start with materials. If I look going forward, what we're seeing is massive advantage in material science, how we use the commodities in the automobile. The first one there is silicon. Well, guess what? We're going to move to silicon carbide. This is all about power electronics, increasing the efficiency of how we move electricity around. If I look at the second one there, well, we've got to move towards graphite, right? Moving away from steel and aluminum towards graphite. Third thing, oil towards lithium, and everything towards what's called graphene. Because there are new carbon technologies which really have qualities that we have not seen in any form of materials before. The second thing we've got is, I would say, is the electrification of the automobile and EV penetration. If you look, what you see is that took all the oil industry and had a look at how they see EV penetration, and what you see is they're pretty conservative. Naturally, that's what you do, is you protect what you have in the past. This is the most aggressive ones are BNEF, Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and I actually think their numbers are conservative. And I'll come back to why that is. There's a few reasons. One is battery prices. Battery prices, you look at them, fallen 90% over the last 10 years. We'll move towards sort of cost parity, and I mean CapEx cost parity, with the ICE by 2020. We already have cost of ownership parity with the internal combustion engine, right? The second thing is China. I'll just give you the number, is that China has 200 EV startups, 200. In North America and Europe together, I can name 10. Okay, and of that 10, 7 of them are scooter manufacturers, right? So what it is China has a very clear goal, which is they want to become the #1 in this industry. And they already are, because if you look in terms of whatever it is, in terms of bikes, electric scooters, cars, buses, they're #1. They're already the #1 market for it. And also, they're the technology leaders, right? Then the next thing I would say is the electrification of transport makes economic sense. This is DHL, one of the biggest logistics companies in the world. They decided to go and ask all the European manufacturers to manufacture them an electric vehicle, and they all said no. So they said, okay, what can we do? So they bought a startup from a university called Street Scooter, who designed an electric vehicle, and they went into their own production. Just remember that. I'm a client, and I go to my supplier and I say, I want to have X, Y, and Z, and you say no. And they go and do it themselves. This is what they've done. The interesting thing about it is, why have they done this? They've done this because of economics, right? Is the cost of owning this electric car within a city makes sense today against a diesel engine, right? The other thing, though, going to China, is China has 300,000 electric buses on the roads. Europe and the United States together don't have 500. I just realized 300,000 versus 500. The next thing is, and this is clear for me, is that it's a $210 billion opportunity. That's how big the automobile industry is. And the Chinese look at it and say, great, we have a chance to take a big stake in this. We in the Western world think, oh, we need to protect this $210 billion opportunity. It's very difficult to protect it when you're going from 1,400 components down to 200 components. Right? That's very difficult to try to protect. The next thing is that I would say is that Europe has no choice but to react. And the reason is this graph here in the middle. You see this here? Just this. This is the lithium-ion production in the world compared to internal combustion engine. 25% of internal combustion engines are produced in Europe, 3% are lithium-ion. So we have to play catch-up really quickly. And if we don't play catch-up, the automobile industry really it's dead, okay? The next thing I would say is that what we're seeing is that the automobile industry is believing that it's happening quicker than what we think. This here is from Schaeffler. Schaeffler, the CEO of Schaeffler gave this presentation a year ago. Schaeffler is a gearbox manufacturer, right? So they're going to be very, very quickly impacted by a move to electrification because you'll get rid of the gearbox and you move to electric drive. His view is, that's the number, look at the number, 2030, they're saying 120 million cars sold a year, and of that, basically, you have 47% of it are going to have some form of electric engine. Take the number on that, that's 60 million cars. And so this is not me saying that, this is Schaeffler saying it, right? So, and that's his base case. This is how he really looks at the world. That's how he looks at it. Whole strategy, 70% of all cars will have some form of electric engine in it by 2030. That's his view. The next thing is, I'll be clear as well, is it won't be a hydrogen economy. And I'll explain why. Very simply, it's about efficiencies. If I have surplus electricity in the grid, which we're probably going to have as we roll out more and more renewables, if I put it into a battery, I have 86% efficiency. I lose 14% of it between coming from the grid to the wheels. If I put it in a fuel cell, I lose most of it, right? So just from a cost point of view, you can see, okay, well, that's not going to work. But the other interesting thing is the cost of it. This is the Toyota fuel cell car, which I drove about 6 weeks ago. And it really is like driving a Volkswagen Golf from 15 years ago. It is just horrible, right? But it cost me 78,000 euros. And just to put that into perspective, if I bought a Nissan Leaf today, electric, I'll pay 25,000 for it. So who the hell is going to buy this crappy car, right? Nobody. The reality is nobody's buying it, right? And it will take them, if they're lucky, maybe 5 years to catch up on electric vehicles, if they can. Now, the only chance for them is long-distance trucking, right? That's the only chance for them. But again, we still don't have any commercial vehicles on the road, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say just for commodities, what does that mean? It's the big hope for platinum, right? Because if you go to fuel cells, you need platinum in it. The other thing is the car's digitalizing. We probably don't notice how fast this is happening. But if you think of Boeing 787, it's got 18 million lines of code. If I see the new Audi electric car, which comes out next year, it's got 150 million lines of code. Open the car up, you can't repair it. Take any modern car today, you cannot repair these cars. They're all completely digital, right? And they're going to go more so. And we go towards autonomous, guess what happens? It goes even more that way. And why do I say this? Because what we see all around us in our world is the world is digitalizing. And digitalization is all about software, sensors, controls, and they all need electricity. Right? All need electricity. They don't need oil, they need electricity. The other thing that's happening in industry is services. The automobile industry is moving to services. Now, what do I mean by services? Let me just explain what's going on in terms of 3 companies, Didi and Uber. We'll start with them. Didi is a Chinese company, pre-money valuation of 52 billion in its last capital raise. Uber is likely to IPO this year. It'll IPO, and it will have a bigger market capitalization than Volkswagen or Toyota. Right? And that tells you something, right? The financial market does not believe that the future is Volkswagen or Toyota. They believe these service business models are the future. So what does this all mean for you, right, in this room here? I would say first and foremost, this is the great news. I just took the Volkswagen Golf, right, because they have the same chassis, et cetera, et cetera. And what you realize is Volkswagen Golf, internal combustion engine car, 1,300 kilograms, e-Golf, 1,580. So whatever way we look at it, there's a 10 to 20% increase in raw materials, right? That's the great news. And most of this is metals, right? And the most of it is because of batteries, right? The second thing is, and we have to look at, there's going to be winners and losers in this. And if you look at the winners and losers, this is again the Volkswagen Golf, the engine's gone. The engine is gone, right? So what does that mean? Well, what you lose is the engine, which is 50 kilograms, exhaust 15 kilograms, fuel tank 15 kilograms, drivetrain 40 kilograms. You lose 120 kilograms of materials. But you're gaining, on the other side, 400 kilograms of other materials, the battery being the major one, and that's why we focus a lot on battery metals, 330 kilograms, power electronics 35, electric motor 35. So if you look at who's the loser, if we go electric, platinum is gone, right? We don't need it. Right? Why? So, but the other thing I would say is steel and iron will lose out. engine. We don't need these engine blocks anymore, right? The third thing that what's going to happen is I think you're going to see a big change in where value is created within the automobile industry. At present, if you look at it, what actually happens is the raw material suppliers don't really earn a lot of money. The reason is because it's commoditized to the point that the power is with the big automobile manufacturers, right? And the big suppliers. It's a Bosch, it's a BMW, whatever. That's changing. It is, I think I said this yesterday, it's really difficult for Volkswagen to try and deal with Glencore. Right? It's a totally different animal, right? You've got a trader dealing with, a very conservative business in Volkswagen. And this is very, very interesting. So what this also means is they have to get their hands on cobalt. I put in this here because this is silicon carbide, because I know these are only small materials, but moving to this type of material is very, very important for the car manufacturer, because you can increase the range by moving from silicon to silicon carbide. You can increase the range of a car by 10% just by changing the power electronics. The next thing I would say is lithium. Lithium-ion is the technology of the future. And when I say that, I think for the next 10 years. And although there's lots of other technologies out there that might be better and whatever, realize that the quality is so important with these automobile manufacturers that once they go this way, it's very slow for them to change. So what you're probably going to find is that lithium will definitely be a winner going forward because of its qualities. But what we'll do is they will not go and re-equip all these battery plants. And realize the capacity that's going online in this industry is so big. But I will say there are different technologies. And I just focus on two lithium ones here. What's called LFP and NMC. LFP is the big growth technology. And the reason is because it doesn't have cobalt in it. Be clear on that. It doesn't have cobalt in it. So if you look in China, every single electric bus, those 200,000 I talk about, use LFP. I have batteries in my home. It's LFP, right? It's cheap and it's stable, and you don't have risk of fire. The reason we have cobalt in the batteries is because you have to you're protecting the battery from fires, right? That's what you're doing. The more nickel you put in, the more energy density you have, but the problem is you're increasing the likelihood of fires. So Tesla might go into NMC, which have lower levels of cobalt, but BMW and these guys are very, very cautious about it, right? The fifth thing is lithium is the long-term winner. The reason is because if you look at the chemical properties of it, it is very light. This is really critical. It is very light. And because it's very light, that means energy density-wise, weight density and so on, it has an advantage. So for me, it's clear this will not go away. The next thing is it has very special electrical properties, which again enable it very efficient in terms of how it transfers energy. And if you look at the new technologies, whether they're solid state or whatever it is, most of them have lithium in it, right? That's what they have, okay? They have lithium in them. And the good news is there's lots of reserves out there. Right? Copper will be a big winner. 25 kilograms is what you probably have in the average car. You could be going to 80 to 200. A bus is probably up at 200. 80 kilograms is the car. And you can see where it is. It's wiring. It's the electric drive itself, right? It's the battery housing. And the other thing is we haven't talked about is you buy a car, everybody buys a charger. And the charger has 1 to 10 kilograms in it. And then we've got, guess what? We've got all the cabling that needs to go into building up the infrastructure alongside this, right? So again, I think there's, and I don't believe there's any, I don't see at this point in time any alternative to copper. Cobalt. I'll explain why cobalt is the short-term winner. For me, short-term is 5 years. I don't know if it's going to be the medium-term winner. And the reason is because of this, is that it's expensive. It's very difficult to get out of the ground. And I'm an automobile manufacturer like Volkswagen who said, I'm going to produce 3 million electric cars in 2023. And he goes on the market, and guess what? He can't get his hands on cobalt. So what does he do? He changes his plans, or he goes and starts investing in new technologies that avoid using cobalt. And that's what Volkswagen is doing, right? They're pumping massive amount. They put 100 million into a solid-state battery company the other day, right? This is because they're afraid of this. What will happen is you will move from this NMC 111 to NMC 811. And you can see why. Costs. That's just on one part of the value chain. This is only the cathode side. 40% decrease in cost by just moving to NMC 811. And of course, the reason we do it is nickel has energy density. That means greater range, but you still have cobalt in it, right? So cobalt is short-term winner, but I think nickel is really the medium-term winner because you can't do without it. It's all about energy density in these cars. You need to increase the range of the car if you want this electric cars to go mass market. Eighth thing is China is dominating EVs. I just want to give you can see the statistics there. Electric scooters, 90% market share worldwide. EVs, 50%. Lithium-ion battery capacity, 50%. Electric bus sales, look at them. Rare earth metals, graphite. I mean, they control the whole value chain. So let's be really clear on this. Strategically, it's sort of almost game over for us in the West already because China takes a 10-year view and we don't. So ninth, what I would say is this. I'm very convinced that electrification of transport will impact the wealth of nations. And you can imagine oil industry. Yeah, suddenly Chile becomes an incredibly important country. Democratic Republic of Congo becomes very important, right? Germany has got huge problems trying to restructure its industry and move to that. So we're as I said, in a revolution. But there are some uncertainties in it. First thing is we don't know how many cars are going to be out there going forward. Because what we don't know is how many people are going to own cars. Are we going to go to car sharing, right? There's a general view that we're going to go to car sharing. If you see the growth projections going forward, some people say 2030 there'll be 120 million cars. There are other people who say 50 million. My own view is that we'll peak within the next decade. And we'll peak because we will move to car sharing, we will go to autonomous cars, we'll go to P2P sharing, all this type of stuff. And guess what? You just won't bother. And we are moving into this society where we don't own things anymore. We actually just really rent them as we go along. The second thing I would say to you is it is difficult to know the penetration rates of the different technologies. You can imagine if we don't go fully electric, and what we do is we go to plug-in hybrid, about 9 kilowatt-hour battery as opposed to 40, right? I mean, that's a big impact. I own a plug-in hybrid, and I can tell you, I'm going fully electric last time, because the disadvantage of the plug-in hybrid is that you have a small fuel tank. So my BMW has a range of 400 kilometers. And it's a combustion engine and an EV. I go, man, this doesn't make sense, does it? I'll just go to the electric car, which has 400 kilometers, and it's faster and more fun to drive, right? So that's my view on the thing. The third thing is that there could be surprises in terms of technology. I would start with this surprise from BMW. The i3 is a terrible car, right? But what BMW have done, the most interesting thing that BMW have done is they've made the first car company to make the whole shell of the car out of graphite. That's a very interesting revolution. And BMW's goal is to bring this technology out across all their cars. That's their goal, and they believe that they can reach parity with aluminium by 2022. Now, if you do that, suddenly you can see the weight difference just from getting the e-Golf. I'm saving 300 kilograms worth of material. And you can see what that means for the steel industry and for the aluminium industry if you do this, right? And my guess is that they will win out. Right. Finally, I liken this to being back in 1890 to 1910. And the reason I say that is because we had in 1890 to 1910 two revolutions. We had an internal combustion engine. Start of the automobile industry. Was it going to be electric? Was it going to be internal combustion? And the second thing was we had an energy industry revolution. We had the oil industry and we had the electrical industry. And all these great businesses were created in that 20-year period in Europe and in North America. And that's the way China looks at it now. They look and say, we can create these businesses that will be around for 100 years creating shareholder value. I'll stop at that point in time.
I think I'd like to have room for one question, if there's room for one question. So anyone want to challenge, support?
I said, I don't come from the mining industry, and that's probably a good thing.
Which is a good
right?
thing.
It's a good thing, right? So I'm giving you an outside-in view, and I'm really about technology. That's what I'm about, financing technology companies. So what I'm giving you is what I'm seeing happening at the technology level, right? Yeah, sorry, yeah. So, okay, that wasn't the theme of the presentation. That's why I didn't go into it. So if I go into the energy industry, for me, what's very clear is that solar is the game-changing technology, right? It's very cheap to make, and it's getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, right? And when I say, I look back in 20 years' time, is our power system, which used to be based around coal, will be based around solar. And you see this already, just I'm going to use the example of Chile because we're all into mining, is if you look at the big mining companies, actually, guess where they're getting their power from these days? It's actually coming from solar. The reason is because the solar costs in Chile are $20 a megawatt hour, and if you look at the electricity costs coming from coal, they're up at $60. Engie, French utility, just closed three power generation plants from coal in Chile. And they said, we're not going to sell them because we don't want competitors coming into the market. We're closing them because we cannot make any money with them. And I think you're going to see that more and more. And again, as I said, I'm coming from the technology side where I'm seeing this happening. I hear this argument all the time. This is not right. If I just take the example you just said about agriculture, right? If you take biofuels and you decide to convert biofuels into electricity or put it into a car through ethanol, right? The efficiency of using that agricultural land is about 1/4%. If I put solar panels on that right today with the technology I have 20% efficiency. What that means is that I need 1/50th of the land requirement to actually produce electricity from solar than I do with biofuels. And I'm very convinced that biomass, biofuels, they're all dead as technologies going forward because they're too expensive and they're not sustainable.
So be bearish coal, be bearish farming, be bullish copper.
Very good. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.